Jason, what's up, man? Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of the JJ Redick Podcast with Tommy Alter. It's a huge pleasure to have you on, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
I know you're doing a lot of these right now, and there's a lot of background available. But just for the listener, can you just talk a little bit about how you got attached to the Jordan project?
They came to me. Mike Tolan from Mandalay Sports Media is the production company on this. Came to me in July of 2016. Invited me out to dinner in New York and asked me if I'd be interested in being a director for a multi-part series that utilized this like urban legend footage that was in the basement of the NBA vaults since the 1997-98 season. That they had embedded cameras for the whole season. It is true. There is footage because we had all heard about this and said, like, how much could there possibly be? It is true. It's there. There's footage. And Jordan has just agreed to be a part of the project, which meant that the footage could be used because that was the condition upon which they shot it. Because Adam Silver told him, at worst, this will be the best home movies of all time for you. And we'll only allow this stuff to be seen if you give your sign off. So almost 20 years later, he gives the sign off and they asked me if I'd be interested. And of course, it was like, capital YES, yes. And then it stalled for so long, the negotiations between like all ESPN and Netflix and NBA and the Jordan brand stalled for so long that I went off and made the Andre the Giant documentary for HBO. Was gone for more than a year doing that, came back and they still were like dotting I's and crossing T's and the timing worked out. And we started in January of 2018 working on The Last Dance.
From episode 1 on, I've had the same like question, and you're the perfect person to ask this. What was the creative process like in making the decision to not just focus on that one season, but to really tell the whole backstory? And a lot of it, centers on Michael, obviously, but there's obviously all the characters on that Bulls team that you kind of go into great detail with.
It evolved pretty quickly from my initial discussions with them. The first time that I met all of the partners at a table, they said, do you think you can make 8 episodes that were wall to wall, just the footage? And I had only seen a couple of hours of the footage at that point, but there was no way we could do that. I mean, any basketball fan would have such a great time watching the best 8 hours of this behind the scenes footage, because just to watch a shoot around with these guys and recognize who's doing what and how they interact with each other is fascinating. But they initially asked, like, they said, we don't want to do, or do we have to do present day interviews? Michael's been interviewed 1,000 times about all this stuff, so you can just use archival for him. You don't need him. And I think there was a concern among some of the partners that present day interviews, people would be giving revisionist history. And my thought was that enough time had passed that the truth would come out and people would be comfortable telling the truth. So we had many discussions about that, which were cordial and respectful. So pretty quickly, I kind of like just went underground for a couple of weeks and came up with this 14-page outline for an 8-episode series at that point that went back and forth in time. So there were 2 timelines. There was the 97-98 season, and then converging with that was 84-98. And how the Bulls evolved from there, with Michael, of course, as the main character. So by the time you get to episode 10, there's no more flashbacks because the timelines have converged.
Right.
So it was easier to say on paper than it has been to edit and tell the story, because there's so many. Someone asked, why wouldn't you just tell this chronologically? Well, if we told it chronologically, you'd start with the birth of Phil Jackson, like back in the 40s. Like that wouldn't make sense. You have to set the stakes at the beginning. Like, why is this The Last Dance? Well, then you have to introduce Jerry Krause and Phil Jackson, and you have to tell a little bit of their backstory for why there was so much tension there. You have to tell a little bit of Scotty's backstory to say why he signed a bad deal, a conservative deal, and then resented the fact that they didn't re-up with him or rip up the contract and renew it. So you have to know about Jerry Reinsdorf in order to tell that story fully. So more moving parts than I've ever had to deal with. But
right. I think one of the fun parts for me has been the converging timelines, because like in the 90s, I was about 2 things. It was Duke basketball and Michael Jordan. Mm-hmm. And my earliest sports memories were around 91, 92. So I don't remember much of the Bulls-Lakers series, but I remember watching Bulls Trailblazers by the time the Bulls Suns rolled around, like I was all in on basketball and all in on Duke. So I was watching basketball all the time. But to get the footage and the stories from the 80s and even Scotty's evolution to get to the point where he is an all NBA player in the early 90s, like that was really fun for me to sort of live for the first time. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that grew up in the 90s, you know, that were maybe born right around the time Jordan was winning his first championship, that don't have a great recollection of those early teams. And it's all sort of just, like you said, urban legend. And so to see that sort of play out has been really fascinating and a lot of fun.
I think that's one of the things that's been eye-opening for me, because I look back and I remember, I'm older than you, so I remember those years vividly. In fact, by the time the Shrug game happened, people of my age, a lot of us were sick of Jordan and the Bulls at that point. They had won so much. It's like we got sick of the Cowboys. We got sick of the Bulls. No matter how great someone is, you get sick of them. It's when they fall and rise again. It's like this Tiger Woods thing we just went through. That's when you're like, you have a new appreciation for them. But looking back at it now and studying it with the detail that I've had to study it with in order to tell the story. Can we swear on this?
Yeah. Go ahead.
How fucking hard it was every year to do this. Like, JJ, you're a pro athlete and you know the sacrifices that are necessary and what goes into it. I can tell you the sacrifices necessary to make a documentary for a couple of years, but it's very easy to look back on the 90s and think they were the best team. They had the best team every year and they just won 6 out of 8 because they were the best team and they had the most talent on the floor at the same time. So much more goes into it than that. And you can really go down to specific plays in each of these seasons where everything could have fallen apart. In 93, they go down 2-0 and the press he's under more scrutiny than he's ever been under and decides not to talk to the press for the first time in his life. If they lose game 3, it's a wrap. That's it. We're not having this conversation. Because he probably would have left and either not come back or would be talking about he did lose one. So many times this thing could have gone haywire and they overcame it. So it was fascinating to go back and look at it, not from 35,000 feet, but from ground level.
In watching the episode about that 93 series with the Knicks and Doc was there and it brought me back to something that Doc said while the Warriors were making their run. And early on, in reference to the 2015 team season, you got to have luck to win a championship. And the Warriors, of course, took offense to that, but I don't think Doc meant that they were lucky to win. I think what he meant is exactly what you're saying, that during any run, no matter how much talent you have, there's a game or two during those runs or a play or two where if it goes the other way, the whole thing's off. The whole thing's fucked.
The same goes for
you think about the Charles Smith finish. I remember that so vividly, and sitting in my chair watching on television. Like if this goes in, like I would be devastated.
Like what if they call a foul? If he misses by an inch, if his hand is 1/2 an inch lower, even if it's not, they easily could have called a foul on that. We watched it again and again and again. I was like, dude, someone committed a foul here. You don't get like a strip and 2 blocks and whatever happened within those 8 seconds without there being some sort of foul. I understand you swallow the whistle at that point of the game, but it's you could extrapolate it over to football with Brady. Like I'm a Patriots guy, but there's so many times that could have gone either way, and we're having a different discussion about someone's greatness. They were still just as great, for better or worse.
Right.
Before David Tyree makes the helmet catch, it doesn't mean they're better or worse as a person. It's just their legacy grows, the mythology grows because of it.
And it can hurt you if you're a guy like Charles Barkley or Patrick Ewing, who's going against Jordan during these runs.
Yep.
It can be devastating to your legacy.
The Barkley footage in episode 6 was a great thing for his rep. Because I think a lot of younger people don't realize how good he actually was. And they just know him as the TNT dude who's just funny. And like, he made a bunch of All-Star games and stuff like that. But when you see him in action and you realize how close they were to actually winning that series, it changes the perspective if you were not a diehard fan in the early 90s.
And he was known, it's the way that body types and conditioning have evolved. He was known as the round mound of rebound back then. And we're looking at him now like that's slim Charles Barkley. younger people are like, holy shit, I can't believe that he was that skinny, because Charles is a much bigger guy now. But he was known as like Tubby back then compared to the players, you know? I think he's listed at what, like 6'6"? I thought that I read somewhere he's only like 6'4.5", and led the league in rebound. Like, his athleticism, pound for pound, was absolutely off the charts. If you look at some of his Auburn highlights.
Speaking of luck, I don't know if either of you guys can explain this to me. How did Bowie happen in the draft?
I can give my answer, and then JJ as an expert.
I want both of your answers on this, because Hakeem is an obvious. There's an obvious reason why it happened. But how did Bowie happen?
You talk about luck, right? So back then there was a coin flip. There wasn't a lottery, and the bottom two teams flipped a coin to see who would get the first pick. So Houston gets the first pick, and anyone who was going to get the first pick was going to take Hakeem Olajuwon. Even though Michael was Player of the Year that year, the NBA was built around big men. This is another thing that Jerry Krause doesn't get credit for, is that he built that dynasty around a two guard, which was unheard of back then. You build it around a point guard and a big man. You build it around Magic and Kareem. You do not build it around Byron Scott. So Hakeem goes with Houston because they had won the toss. Portland had Clyde Drexler already, who was in many circles considered to be on par with Michael, or even better at that point, because he had more of a pro pedigree at that point. They also had Jim Paxson, who I believe was an all-star then, John Paxson's brother. So their backcourt was set. If Michael went to Portland, then I think he would have emerged as a starter pretty soon, but he would have been like coming off the bench immediately there. Also, his personal development, if he went to Portland, Nike was right there. He had to make his own way in Chicago. There's a million reasons why he became who he became, because he went to Chicago and nowhere else. So let's say that the coin flip goes differently. Oh, that's why they took Bowie, by the way. It's a big man league, and they already had Clyde Drexler. If the coin flip goes differently and Portland gets the first pick, they're still going to take Clyde Drexler. Houston would have taken Michael Jordan. So a coin flip away from Michael Jordan going to the Houston Rockets to play with Ralph Sampson. And that is how he would have had to make his way. They still would have made that team around Ralph Sampson. Who knows what Michael's career would have emerged as. He still would have been one of the greatest. I don't know that they would have relied on him as much in the early going as they relied on him in Chicago. The other thing, too, is that he came this close to signing with Spot Built. So instead of wearing black and red Nikes right now, we could be wearing orange and yellow Spot Builts, and that could be the shoe. There's so many little things that had to happen exactly right. David Stern came on as commissioner the year that Michael was a rookie and reinstated the dunk contest. And when I was that age, I cared about the dunk contest more than the finals. Michael Jordan was not on my wall hitting a jump shot. He was on my wall dunking. David Stern knew that and brought that aspect back to the league. If Michael's not born in 1963, then he doesn't turn 21 in 84. He doesn't leave to go to the NBA in 84 when ESPN starts broadcasting games nationally and internationally, and David Stern comes on and recognizes how to evolve the league. So many things had to happen perfectly. That's my Sam Bowie answer. Sorry.
Gladwell should have wrote a chapter on Jordan in the Outliers book. He should have been in there. He should have been in there. I think you nailed it in terms of the league for a long time was just built around big guys. You know, Iverson as the number one pick in 96. I think it was 96 or was it 97? Mm-hmm. Whatever year that was. You know, that was an anomaly to be a point guard taking that early. I want to go back to one Charles Barkley story I have. So when I was coming out of the draft, I had hurt my back, and I had done all my West Coast workouts, and then I had to work out for like 4 or 5 East Coast teams, and they ended up just being interviews. And so I came to Philly, and Billy King was the GM at the time, met with me, met with Mo Cheeks, and then Billy took me out to dinner. And I can't remember where we went, but Barkley was sitting at the bar, and he was having a burger at the bar, and Billy went and introduced me to him. And Barkley was like, "Hey man, there's no way you're going to be able to be a 2 guard in the NBA." And I said, "Okay." He said, "Yeah, you need to be a point guard." And I said, "Okay." He goes, "You're just too small." And I remember thinking to myself, why do I have to change positions? Like, I'll make it work. Anyways, that's it. That's all I got.
Well, that's his mentality he said in the doc, like, that was the moment. It took until 1993, the middle of the finals, for him to accept the fact that he was not the best basketball player on planet Earth. So as Michael wins the first one, as he's shrugging against Portland, Chuck is at home watching, thinking, I'm better than him. And
that's great.
I mean, you could be better. You have to have that mentality, I guess, to function like that. But that's, what are you, you're 6'3"?
I'd say 6'4" barefoot. I'm close enough to 6'4". I was measured at 6'4" at the combine barefoot. So.
And he was saying that you're not big enough to be a 2 guard, and he's a half inch taller than you, and he's a power forward.
My biggest issue is my alligator arms. I just don't have a wingspan.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys think? Do you guys think a book like the Jordan Rules could happen today?
That's what I was going to ask you about, JJ, because I'm really interested in, obviously, the fishbowl that those guys were in, that Michael was in the 90s. Yeah. We showed how he's trying to cope with that. But I remember reading stories a while back. You got a shitload of like hate mail and stuff at Duke, right? Like email.
Yeah. And phone calls in the middle of the night from Maryland fans. I had to change my number a bunch of times. They would just keep getting it. I never found out who the leak was.
So what do you think would happen now if you were the same kind of lightning rod polarizing figure in basketball now with social media the way it is now? How do you think you would have reacted, and what would you have done to cope with it?
I think it would have been harder to cope with it. Like I've been open about this. I had to see a therapist for 3 years at Duke. My sophomore through my senior year, I saw a therapist once a week, just to kind of help me deal with that and what felt like a fishbowl. And, that's a very relative sort of feeling depending on, what situation you're in. But I do think, the mental health conversation that athletes are starting to have out in public now, I think that's a direct result of social media and the microscope that's kind of put on players. I think it's harder. I think it's harder to be an athlete now. Like at least for me as a kid, like I didn't know a whole lot about Jordan or Barkley or Reggie Miller, like anything about their personal life or what they stood for. And I know Jordan kind of touched on the Republican thing in was it episode 5? It was 5. Yeah, it was 5. Yeah. So, it's so much easier now to sort of get access to the other side of an athlete, which can be a good thing, but it also obviously creates sort of an even bigger fishbowl because it's just more shit on you.
Yeah, and it's controllable to a certain extent. Like if you want to be showing your house, you can do that. You can do Instagram lives every day. You can do that. You can show off-season workouts with these. I think he would have been terrible at it and hated it. Like he is the world's richest gym rat. Like that's what he cares about is the basketball. And I know that sounds like, painting him with like this perfect brush, but that's what he cared about all along. He was acutely aware, and he said it in episode 5, that his game did all of his talking, that none of this McDonald's and Hanes and Gatorade and Nike, none of that was there if he was averaging 2 points and 3 rebounds. He was acutely aware of that at all times, that if that goes away, it's all gone. That's why you have the Jordan Dome, and you'll see it in episode 8. When he comes back, they had to build him a dome so he could get back into basketball shape while he was shooting Space Jam. Because what does he care about being in a cartoon movie? Because that's the fruits of his labor, but the labor is working out. So he was shooting all day and then working out on weights with Tim Grover and then playing pickup games, like the greatest pickup games maybe of all time besides Monte Carlo that summer.
I was thinking as he was talking about that, I was thinking a little bit about Kobe. And just how into basketball Kobe was. And it seemed like he recognized that as much as MJ. Like everything comes from basketball. Everything comes from my greatness on the basketball court. And I wanted to ask you this because you spent time with MJ and you got to interview Kobe as well. But it seems to me like both those guys somehow were able to relax a little bit after the fact. Like they were so driven and so wired as players and maybe they channel that into other ways, but it seems like there's that adjustment period for athletes where you actually like have to learn how to turn that off, and it can be really frustrating.
I think that's right. It's just human nature. I don't think your brain, it's Darwinian. Your brain cannot operate that intensely your whole life, or your engine would just burn out. But that's why it was really fun to hand Michael that iPad, because that was like a portal back to that. It's like a magic trick. As soon as he touched that thing, he was back in the 90s. Because I can read him a quote from Isaiah or whatever, but when he sees Reggie's face, and you'll see this later on in the series, when he sees Reggie saying something and hears his voice, and you just see his facial expressions on that thing are fantastic when he's looking down at those things. He doesn't even have to speak. You can tell that he thinks that what Isaiah's saying is bullshit just by his facial expression. And when he sees Gary Payton explaining that, like, they could have stopped the Bulls if he was guarding him from game one, like, those are my favorite parts of the doc, because that's when I think the realist version of Michael comes out. That's when that competitor comes back out. I don't think that version of Michael is there when he's playing with his grandson. But I do think it's there when you sit there and you talk to him. He has a photographic memory of these series, as I'm sure you're not surprised. That idea came from one of the first times I met him. I don't know how it came up, but I pulled up. My brother and I were looking at Jordan clips when I got this job, just to be like, holy shit, I can't believe we were saying, we got to use this. We got to use this. I run stuff by my brothers all the time because they're basically like my audience, and they're not even in the business. And there's one clip online. It's like 7 minutes long, and it's all of the Jordan fights that he's gotten in. Any confrontation, my two favorite Jordan clips are when he's standing over Ewing at the Garden, when he screams at him after the and one, and when he throws Scottie Pippen out of the way and says, "Fuck you, baby," to Xavier McDaniel. That's because he's defending Scottie Pippen. It just fires me up. So there's a whole reel of those cut to music. And we were talking about it, and I called it up and I showed him. He locked in. Took my phone and was just like doing this and smirking and like mumbling to himself, like giving commentary, like, yep, that was at Marcus Square Arena. I remember that. They threw him out. They didn't throw me out. It was like, we have to use this. Like, people need to see this Jordan, like, reliving these things. So I do think that they've relaxed quite a bit, maybe competitively, but like, look at Kobe. That passionate a guy is not going to stop being passionate about something. He may not be as passionate about winning an NBA title anymore. And look at how he threw himself into other arenas, including imagine what he would have done for women's basketball and what Gia would have done for women's basketball. It still doesn't make sense to even be discussing that. But Tommy, I don't think you can turn that off. I think it's DNA.
Tommy, we talked about this a little bit with Seth Curry last week. But this like hatred that players of that era had for each other, I just feel like it doesn't really exist on that level anymore. Do you guys have any theories why?
Well, I want to hear Jason's answer, but I guess the thing that we've talked about with a few different guys is that it's not necessarily that it doesn't exist as much as it's more passive aggressive, and it is not manifested in these specific ways that, like, very clearly Isaiah and Michael hated each other then, and they hate each other now, and it was one of the iconic moments from last weekend is nothing has changed in 20 years, and now it just seems like when those things exist, guys will take smiling Instagrams together, but it doesn't mean they actually don't feel the same way. But Jason, what do you think?
I think it's a testament to the growth of the game and the growth of technology. So those guys weren't exposed to each other more than a couple of times a year. So you might see them in an all-star game or at the finals or at a charity game, but there's so many events now that the NBA sponsors that players see each other at. There's so many sponsorship deals, and it's global, and they're going on trips, these trips where they're flying first class to all these countries and doing promotional trips for a shoe company. I think there's a lot more interaction both in person and definitely online with these guys, and they share trainers in the off season. The game has just grown in every facet. So they have more exposure to each other, and the more exposure you get to someone, the more their humanity emerges, and the more you're like, you know what, whatever. He's not like, fuck you for walking off against me in 91, but we can have a beer about it and laugh. Magic and Larry famously weren't close. Ezra Edelman did his doc, the Magic and Larry doc, which is still one of the best films I've ever seen. It's incredible. Go see it if you haven't seen it. It's like mandatory viewing for any basketball fan, especially. They didn't like each other until they filmed a commercial together and spent time. Magic had a meal that Larry's mom cooked, and they got to know each other as people. So I think that players of today, either online or in person, have way more opportunities to get to know each other as people. But like you said, it's way more passive aggressive, because I'm sure there's plenty of people who hate each other's guts. They just can't say it the way that they could back then.
Sure. It is a lot of passive aggressive. It's also very easy to throw shade on social media and not have it sort of escalate. But then when you play them 2-3 weeks later, you just don't acknowledge that person. But there's not that like just like in your face, like people choking each other. It just doesn't happen anymore.
How often in a locker room setting are you guys like showing each other shit? Like, did you see what he said about this?
Oh, all day long.
Really?
Oh, we're always sharing things, either on the group chat if we're not together, or on the bus plane. Yeah, we're always sharing. We talk about everything that's going on in the NBA. I was going to say one more thing about like the exposure level. I think the USA basketball program, the way they redid it in 05, 06, with that first sort of world championship team, and then the Redeem team in 08, where, prior to that, they would bring these guys in, starting in 92, you'd bring them in, you'd practice for 2 weeks, and then you'd go play the Olympics. And now it's like every summer, these guys are getting together. Even when there's not a competition, there's still like, a 2 or 3 week time in Vegas where you're hanging out with each other. And so that you are, and these are the greatest players, the greatest American players, at least, in the world. And obviously the European guys and the guys in Asia also play on their national teams. But I think that's also been a component to guys hating or not hating each other. And as we saw with the big three, and as we saw with, DeAndre, Kyrie, and Kevin, like that bond that they formed while playing for the national team ultimately led them to teaming up as NBA teammates.
Look what he did in the Dream Team. That Michael says that's his favorite part of it was the practices. Is he was fascinated to see other people's work ethic or lack thereof, and the camaraderie that he was staying up all night playing cards with Magic and guys that he knew but didn't know that well, and now are lifelong friends of his. Like the fact that Ewing and Larry Bird came out of that as lifelong friends. Like there should be a doc made about their friendship. Just the more exposure you have to each other.
My follow-up, JJ, to that for both you guys is what happens when you add money into the equation? Because obviously with Scotty throughout the doc, that's an ongoing theme. But then even with Michael and Jason, JJ and I were talking about this the other day. He didn't really get paid until his last couple of years in the league. And so when you start having these conversations and all the pettiness and this about attention, but then you have a guy like Scotty who is just by any metric drastically underpaid for what the value that he brings. I guess my question is sort of twofold. For you, Jason, when you were making this, do you think that was just as pervasive a theme throughout the franchise as it seems? And then JJ, for you, is that a thing that people are still paying attention to all the time?
How much guys are getting paid?
Yeah.
It's all anybody talks about.
It still is really what matters.
Look, if there's a guy on a rookie deal in his like third or fourth year, he knows all of his comps. He knows, I can't believe this guy got 4 for 80. I'm going to go kick his ass. Like it's definitely out there. And again, this is sort of the inherent problem with professional team sports is that there is a hierarchy and there is a finite amount of resources to hand out amongst the players. And, if you're a tennis guy, if you're a golfer and you want to pursue greatness, you can do that in a very selfish way, and that's fine. But if you choose to do that in a team sport in a very selfish way, that creates problems. It definitely creates problems.
That's why Rod Thorne said to David Falk, "You're trying to make my guy into a tennis player."
Yeah.
he didn't care if Michael had a good backhand. He's talking about the fact that he didn't want this to rip apart the locker room. And maybe we didn't do a good enough job diving into that. But that is what Rod meant, is that there's going to be resentment in the locker room. And early on, I think that there was, to a certain extent, there was kind of especially with an organization like the Bulls back then, who were mediocre at best, there was an understanding that it's practice and you're going to go through the motions. And certainly you don't want a rookie. It's like when you go play pickup and you're like, just some guy's picking you up full court. Like, all right, just calm down. That was Michael coming in. He said, first day, I'm identifying the best guy on the team and I'm going after him. Then I'm going after the best guy at my position. Like, he came in guns blazing, but he was so good that he gained their respect. But early on, I'm sure they were like, I've talked to guys who were on that team, like, was there resentment? Yes. And there are some guys who are no longer with us, so I think could have spoken even better to it. That's one of the things we don't cover in this, and I'm surprised that people haven't brought it up yet. I'm sure they have somewhere that I haven't seen, is the supposed freeze out in '85 at the All-Star game. So that may or may not have existed. All the research that I've done says that it did not. They clearly were kind of arching their eyebrows at this kid who came in with his own shoe deal, wearing his own warm-ups to the dunk contest. Everyone else was on Converse then, except for like Gervin and Moses, I think, had Nike deals, wearing gold chains. I think Isaiah's version of this, or if you talk to someone about Isaiah's version of this, is that in the elevator at the All-Star game, they didn't speak to each other, and Isaiah thought that was arrogant and aloof. Michael's version, I know, is I didn't know what to say. Like, I was just kind of like, I was thrilled to be there. He said, I went out and I bought a fur coat. I invited my whole family. I couldn't believe that I was now part of this fraternity. So he thought it was out of respect that he didn't want to bother Isaiah Thomas on the elevator. It wasn't like I'm better than you. But he also scored 4 points or 7 points or something. He scored enough points in an All-Star game for a rookie that he couldn't have been frozen out. And also, you can't, as a Magic Johnson can't freeze Michael Jordan out from the other bench. Like, that, it doesn't make sense. Isaiah did say on record with me in the interview, he said, I was not Isaiah Thomas yet. This is the '85 All-Star game. Okay. I'm in a locker room with Larry Bird. Gervin was in that locker room. Who else would have been in the East locker room at that point? Dr. J. Like, he said, you think I'm going to go around and tell Larry Bird to freeze this kid out? I didn't have the clout to do that. So it's a convenient story. Michael said he wasn't aware of it until he came back to Chicago and everyone asked him about this freeze out. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about, but it pissed him off. So he went, they played Detroit first game after the break. And Michael, in his words in the interview to us, said, okay, I'll show you a freeze out. 49. He had the ability, just if he got pissed, he could flip a switch and say, okay, don't forget.
The vindictiveness is on another level. I love it. I love it. I was once frozen out of an All-Star game. True story.
Really?
Not an NBA All-Star game, but yeah, I was.
By
Carmelo. At least that's what was told to me.
What was the reason?
So you could play in 2 All-Star games as a senior in high school. So we go to the McDonald's game in New York City, and it was like Melo, Amari, and Rashad McCants were on my team, and they all had like pretty good games, but I got the MVP, and I don't even know if I really deserve the MVP because a lot of my threes that I hit we were already up like 15, 20 points, but I had like 26 points. I get the MVP. So then the next week we go to the Jordan game in Washington, D.C. And what was told to me by 2 different guys on the team was that Melo was going around telling people, JJ's not going to get the MVP again. I'm taking every shot. And if you look at the box score, I'm just saying, I have no ill will towards Melo. What?
You never asked him about it?
No, I've never asked him about it. We're
going to ask him about it on this show. He's going to come on the show. I
want to actually know if he actually did tell people that, though. He took like 26. He took like 26 shots that game. I think I took like 7
in an All-Star game.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Did he get the MVP?
No, we lost.
Jason, speaking of freeze outs or just stuff like this, with in the episodes that aired Sunday, it gets into Scotty not coming in the game. Mm-hmm. Were you surprised by anything when you were making this? Anything that came out of that interaction after the fact?
First of all, I had to go back and obviously look at the footage and all that. There's a couple of things about the game itself. The difficulty of the shot that Tony hits is like off the charts. Like he's one of the guys I wish we could have given more time. We did not have the time to do like deep dives into these guys. Ron Harper, we could have done an episode about Ron Harper. We could have done 2 episodes about Tony Kukoc and his story and like coming to the States and being perceived as soft when he might be the least soft guy who's come through the Bulls franchise ever, given his background. So the difficulty of the shot was one thing. The other thing was that was such a notorious incident that I had always remembered that as them losing. So going into the project, I was thinking, we got to do that thing when Scotty sat out and they lost the game because of him. Like, no, they won, which is even more awkward and bittersweet. The interesting thing about it, or the confusing thing or challenging thing for us, is that so everyone kind of comes to his defense, to Scotty's defense, because he was a beloved teammate, more so than I even realized in present day interviews. I didn't realize that Michael in practice was like the bad cop and Scotty was the good cop. Scotty was the guy who would like pat you on the back and say like, you'll be all right. If you miss a couple of shots, he would feed you again until you started making it. And Michael was the opposite by all accounts. So they come to his defense. Steve Kerr and Bill Cartwright and BJ and those guys come to his defense. But then Scotty turned around and said he would have done the same thing now. And it's not the bow you want to tie on that story. You want him to be like, yeah, I fucked up. I shouldn't have done that. I'm glad we won. I learned a lesson. We were all better for it. But then he said, like, if I had to do it again, I would have done the same thing. So we were like, do we leave this in? Is it antithetical to what they just said? Like, are we just contradicting what everyone said and confusing this? Or do we have an obligation to say what Scotty thinks, even if it confuses the storyline that would be neater? And we elected to go with the latter because Scotty had to have the last word. It was just bizarre to me that he said, like, through all that, I'd still do the same thing again. Maybe he meant like they'd win the game and he would still take a philosophical stand, but I found that bizarre. The thing is that by episode 10, man, I think that people forget or don't even know the degree to which Scotty had to tough out game 6. His back was gone in those playoffs. And the first bucket the Bulls score in game 6 of the 98 finals is a Scotty dunk. And he pulls his back out on the way down. And anyone who's pulled their back out knows, like, that's it. Your back goes into spasm. You cannot move. He's doing the bad back run where he's got his like elbows back and he's hunched over and he's going like heel toeing it up the floor. He played the entire game. Like, he didn't play every minute, but he never came out. They thought he was going to be back in the trainer's room, and that was it for the night. He kept on going back in for treatment and being a decoy. And every once in a while, he would hit a little baby hook in the lane, so they had to guard him. But he toughed that out. He's almost in tears at the end because he's in such pain. So Scotty will get his due, I think, by the end of this. You're going to hear people say some stuff about Jerry Krause that I'm happy they put in. I really wish we could have interviewed Jerry for this thing, man. I hate that it's being cast that we vilified this guy, and because that was not my intention with this at all.
Did you explore at all the jock tax that has been instituted, and the legend has it it's because of Michael Jordan? Did you know about this?
Jock tax?
The jock tax. Like how athletes pay taxes in every municipality and every state we play?
Not at all.
Okay, so the legend has it was because Jordan was making like $30 million in his last couple of years, and all these states like Ohio and these municipalities like Detroit and Philly that also have, levy a tax on income wanted a piece of that. So I did a little research anyways. And I guess it started in 91 with the Lakers series. California decided to tax Jordan and all his teammates as a retribution for beating the Lakers in the finals. Like
the days they spent in California prorated.
Right. So we pay duty days. Yeah. So like if we go on a West Coast trip, let's say, and we spend like 3 days in Portland, Oregon, which has basically a 10% state income tax, and then you go down to California for another 4 or 5 days. Let's say you hit Sacramento, LA, like your next paycheck, you're paying like duty days on like, anywhere from 10 to 13%. Your money's just gone. It's pretty insane. But so the Illinois governor in 92 passes this law called like Michael Jordan's Revenge, where now he's going to start taxing incoming players and athletes. And we had been taxed before this, but it didn't become a thing until the 90s because of Jordan. It's interesting.
We didn't. I did so much economic research. Like when they said 10 episodes, first of all, I remember vividly in April of 2017, we were interviewing Hulk Hogan for the Andre the Giant documentary in Tampa. And I got a call and they said, how many episodes do you think it should be? We think it should be 8. And I was like, I had just seen the Defiant ones, and that's one of the best things I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, it should be 4. We should, our goal should be for people to say we're copying the Defiant ones in every way. Like, I don't care if people say we're derivative. That thing was flawless. So I said 4, and they were like, what about 6? And I was like, we could stretch it to 6, but like, I think that's the limit. Then May 15th, 2018, May 15th, 2018 is when they make the official announcement that we're making this doc. That's the first time that I found out it was 10 parts. I thought it was 8 up until then. I thought they had gone from 6 to 8 and then 10 parts. So I thought we were going to have to go in so many directions. I read all these economic books. Like I was going to make this just like a doc about the 90s starring Michael Jordan and about like Bill Clinton and all these things. I panicked. I was like, we don't have how are we going to fill up 500 minutes just talking about the 97-98 season and like the Bulls titles and not make it just like such a basketball heavy doc that people are going to tune out. So but I never heard that story. That's like deep in the economic weeds. That's funny.
One thing we have to talk about is the memes that have come out of this. So there's the security guard. This is a security guard meme. There's the Obama. How did you phrase it? The
former Chicago resident.
Former Chicago resident. Did you? And then honestly, we were talking earlier about even just your visual trick of having Michael look at the iPad has completely become a meme. It's been everywhere. Did you anticipate any of these things when you were making this? Did you see any of these things sort of coming into fruition?
No, we joked that like the height of this hysteria possibly would be to get mentioned on SNL. And if Kenan Thompson was like sitting on that bench looking out at the water in a black button down and like we came around and it was him instead of Michael or something like that. Cause I thought that would be like the indelible image of the doc. Cause it was the first one that you see. Certainly did not think former Chicago resident would take hold at all. And certainly didn't think that people would then be asking me, like accusing me of being a Republican and disrespecting like some of the notes that I've gotten, like it's the opposite. I revere this guy. Like I thought it would be cool, like kind of a cute thing to say former Chicago resident and to inform people that that's why he was speaking. Like I would love to say 44th president of the United States. And as you saw later on, he does become that. And now I've seen people say like, well, they corrected it after the criticism, they corrected the graphic. Oh, we didn't, because it wasn't relevant. The first time we got the rough cut back for episode 5, the graphic was there, and Obama is saying these incredibly articulate things about what's expected of an African-American who's in the spotlight now. And it said former Chicago resident. And I was like, who the fuck did this? We're not using former Chicago resident for this. The joke's over. He's former president of the United States. The John Michael thing, that's the security guard, John Michael Wozniak, who, rest in peace, passed away in January. Until the day that he died was the caretaker and security guard at Michael's house in Chicago. Michael lives like full-time elsewhere, but he still has a house back in Chicago where he resided when he was on the Bulls. And John Michael took care of that house until that day, or up until January. The first time we saw him, we had the same reaction 2 years ago that everybody else in the world had, was, who the fuck is that guy? And what is that hair? So he was like a running joke for us for like a month, and then it got boring. Like I say that not derisively, and they did a really good story in The Athletic. A writer tracked down John Michael's son and said that like he would get the biggest kick out of this of anybody, and he like that hair was his calling card, and he kept that hair as long as he could. But the shrug, like it just shows you the relationship he had with those guys, the Snip brothers, and we go into it deeper in episode 9 because there's one of those Snip brothers who was actually like Michael's father figure. And we get into that. But they're like among the only guys who could effectively talk shit to him and come out winners. There's very few people who come out on top in this documentary competitively, and John Michael is one of them.
Well, this is, I guess, a question I had off of that for both of you guys. And people have talked about this and written about this over the last couple of weeks, but do you think there's a world where something like this can ever exist again with an athlete, now that we're in this age of documentation all the time?
I do. Yeah, I mean, I'll give a short answer that I do. That there's still a lot of stuff that people aren't showing us. There's certainly a different mystique around Michael than there is around a guy like LeBron, because Michael wasn't doing Taco Tuesday, and we didn't know as much about Michael's life as we do about LeBron's life. But yeah, I think there's always, if tapes get unearthed in 20 years of LeBron's final season with the Lakers behind the scenes and in the locker room and stuff, that's something that people are always going to want to peek at behind the scenes. JJ?
Yeah, I think if there's, I think for a documentary of this nature, like, you obviously have to have the footage. I mean, that's what makes this so unique is the footage from 97, 98. I think in general, though, any public person, whatever they choose to sort of portray to the world, is ultimately just a projection. There's very few people that are like so raw that it's really them. And so if it ever became like, let's say LeBron, like if there's something that we don't know about LeBron that was worth telling a story about, then yeah, that could exist. And we had footage of that. But I think most guys now, it's you're portraying this image. I'm going to be a fashion guy. I'm going to be a gamer. I'm going to be whatever it is. And then you have footage of that, and it's there's nothing new about it. There's nothing new about it. But if somebody was willing to be like super vulnerable and really get down in the weeds, then yeah, you could do something.
I think there's other sports too. Like I've never seen Coach K out of a suit or a polo shirt. Like if footage emerged even from the early 2000s or when you played for him, of him like at home game planning and screening tape and like it's kind of similar in that we've all heard the stories about Michael, and we've all heard the stories about how filthy and foul-mouthed and crazy Coach K is behind closed doors. I'd be fascinated to see something like that. So I think maybe the NBA is kind of a different social animal, just the way that its players interact with social media, and it's different than any sport today. But any peek behind the curtain in another sport, I think there's definitely an appetite for it.
For sure. I think the footage, I guess you're saying the footage would ultimately have to be from a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades ago, because the footage, it's easy for us to access it right now. And by the way, if there was a documentary on Coach K with archival footage, there would definitely need to be footage of him gardening, because that's his thing. Oh, really? Yeah. That's where he goes to his Zen place, is out in his garden. He's a big shearer.
That's how we shear things. Just a perfect like bed of soil and a big spade going into it. That's how the doc starts.
You heard it. Yeah. 7 years from now, when Coach K is in our next pandemic, when we the 12-hour Coach K doc.
Yeah. What amazing timing, though. I mean, it's to have it ready. It was going to be this year that it was going to come out. It was come out in the finals. It was going to be this year, and then we have this fucking pandemic.
He's an alien, man. I'm convinced that Michael Jordan is an alien life form, and he's not a human being. There's a couple of things. So Hannah Storm told me, and a couple of women have told me this. Hannah Storm, I think Andrea Kramer was another one. They've said Michael was the first person to tell me I was pregnant. I didn't even know I was pregnant. He just came over and said when are you going to start telling people? And Hannah said, she was like, what? Like, you're pregnant? Like, it's. And so we left and then he canceled the interviews a couple of times, and there were huge storms that hit Florida, and he had canceled the interview on us. And he was just like, just the right time is the right time. Like, it's not the right time right now. And then there's this hurricane would hit. We're leaving the interview in December. We just finished. And this was our third and final interview. And he gets up and says, all right, guys, take care. I'll never see you again. Goodbye. And he left. Like, he was half joking. And I'm thinking, that's kind of fucked up. Like, we're going to see him at the premiere. Like, No, he knew this pandemic was coming. He's back on his home planet right now, and he just knows he can see the future. He's a different life form. Like we're all convinced in the edit room that this guy is not of this planet. It's
the Larry Bird line, right? About God Jordan dressed up as God, disguised as God. Yeah. He's guys, what are we taking solace in during this quarantine? I think we should rank a few things that have really just been sort of comforting to us. They could be guilty pleasures. They could be just old standbys, like whatever it is that's helping you get through this quarantine. Tommy, why don't you start?
Are we doing 1-1-1? Are we snaking it, or am I doing
Let's
5?
Snake it. What are we?
We'll snake it.
We'll snake it.
Let's snake it.
Are we doing a draft?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Rom-coms. JJ knows. I've rolled through, I'd say at this point, 25 rom-coms in the last 2 weeks, most of which I'd not seen before, through varying levels of enjoyment for myself. And we're going to rank those specifically on a different show. But it's very soothing to know at like 9 o'clock after I ate my dinner and I got nowhere to go and I have limited number of people to talk to, I can just sit and watch something that like I never would have thought to make a plan to watch this ever. And I wouldn't watch it on a plane. I wouldn't watch it like in transit or anything like that. And so my feeling in general is like with these, I don't want to watch disaster movies. I don't want to watch anything that's too like heavy or dark or anything like that. Just pop them on and now I've seen them. So I don't have to go back to the well.
Need you to send me a good list of rom-coms.
I got it.
You said you did watch Notting Hill.
Yeah.
You watched Notting Hill. And what were your thoughts? Is that would you
Notting
rank?
Notting Hill's strong. Notting Hill is in the top. Notting Hill is in the top. For me, probably top 6 or 7.
Is that a tier 1 rom-com or is that more a tier 2?
I'd say it's on the brink of tier 1.
Okay.
What would be who's the GOAT? Who's considered like the Jordan of?
So I'm not. I can't make that. I can't make the declaration yet. We're gonna have to. There's gonna be a science. There's a science to this.
I don't know the genre well enough. I know if there was one that was like, all right.
Oh, who's the consensus?
And then everything else.
I sent a tweet out asking this question, not meaning to like get people all riled up. I basically sent a tweet out saying, "Is the consensus that Meg Ryan is the MJ of rom-coms?" And people got into my mentions. Julia Roberts, Sandra Bullock for some reason. Reese Witherspoon had some stuff. The Audrey Hepburn stands from like back in the day. It's a thing that people get fired up about.
Those are the George Mikan stands.
Yeah. All right, Jason, you're up.
There is one bar, and there's 2 bars in my neighborhood. One is like a close walk away, and another one is like a little bit further down the river. If we want to venture, my girlfriend and my dog and I are huddled up in this apartment. But there's one bar that they have cocktails to go, and you have to go in like all masked up and everything. And there's like X's on the floor where you stand. It was a restaurant, and now they eliminated all the restaurant, and they just made this barricade with stools and like a high top table. And we're regulars now at that bar, and everyone like the neighborhood still goes and stands outside the bar instead of inside the bar. And they talk to each other from like 8 feet away. But when it's like 5 or 6 o'clock, when the sun starts to set a little bit, I know I'm walking over there to get a bourbon and Coke. I walk in, they know my name, they know my order, they come over. It's the closest replication I can have to like a normal like Cheers bar scenario. But that's become like not a guilty pleasure, but that's like the end of the day, like happy hour drink place. And it's kind of like we're all in this terrified Mardi Gras situation. So the cops are kind of looking the other way with a lot of stuff. So there's people walking around the neighborhood with blatant open containers. And it's not like anyone's partying because we're staying away from each other, but like we can walk along with our dog off the leash and have cocktails walking around. And like that's if we can take solace in like little happy moments like that, that's what we try to do every night is walk over there and then have our own little tailgate looking out over the Hudson.
I think nationwide there should be just New Orleans style rules towards open containers.
Yeah. I agree.
Not just in the pandemic, just in general.
I completely agree.
I wonder like what's
there's nothing better. Like you're at dinner, right? You're at dinner and you're like, you know what? I want to go home, but I also kind of want to have one more.
Yep.
And it's 3 blocks away.
Yep.
What do? You leave with the drink. It's great.
Yes.
It's fantastic. My 2 are very, since it's on me now, I'm gonna pick 2. So number 1, the movies I've been watching are actually all disaster movies. And
Diving into it.
I feel like it's like I'm already in a dark place. Let's just lean into that. You know, I'm already scared and terrified. Let's just lean into that. And so the latest one that I watched was I rewatched 2012, which is just a terribly written movie with, you know, just the plot lines with John Cusack's character are just so bad. They're just so bad. It's a terrible movie.
Is that the one? Does that have to do with the library on Fifth Ave in New York? Doesn't that get like drowned and overtaken, or is that a different?
That's The Day After Tomorrow. That's The Day After Tomorrow. That's the Dennis Quaid movie. Yeah, and a young Jake Gyllenhaal. And then the second one is very simply just a wine opener. I mean, that has just given me great comfort. That has given me great comfort.
Where are you getting your wine?
The new invention of a wine opener.
No, it's like some days you're just like, man, if I could just get to like the kids' bedtime, you know?
What's your feeling on an electronic wine opener? Is that cheating?
Well, so I have like the quick one where it's just like you pop it on. Yep. One of those.
Yep.
That I use for the newer bottles, newer corks, less chance of damaging the cork. And then I have a Duran, which is for the older bottles. But Jason, to answer your question, I have a cellar where I'm at. So I have my own wine. Like I'm going out for like wine I've been to the grocery store like 5 times in 8 weeks. I mean, it's really try not to leave the house. So I have wine here.
And that's not your own home. You're like renting that or visiting, and you're just raiding the wine cellar?
I'm renting a home around the corner from the home that I own.
Okay.
Which has no furniture in it.
Okay.
And is being painted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Every night, JJ's getting wine drunk and watching disaster movies.
That sounds fantastic.
It just explains a lot.
That
How
is
are you
my
staying in
groundhog day.
shape? Like, wasn't there a conference call today with the NBA?
It's later today. Yeah.
So how are you guys staying in shape? Like, what do you do? Do you have a hoop in your driveway? Like,
I have access. So that's actually been that's number 3. I'll just say my third one, which is I feel, and it's a guilty pleasure because not everybody has this, but I have access to a gym. So I've in the last, this is week 8. I quarantined the first 2 weeks. So like the last 6 weeks, I've probably been in the gym, you know, every day, but 4 days. And then I have a little weight room in the basement of my actual house that I've sort of rigged together with some random equipment. It's not a real weight room, but it's just like an empty room, and I put some weights and stuff in there. So I'm doing that. And then there's a great hill actually that I can do hill sprints on. So that's the other one. Like cardiovascular wise, I feel like I'm in decent shape.
I wonder who the highest, like the most prominent name in the NBA is, who's like, fuck, I haven't done anything. I'm serious, because there has to be someone who doesn't have access to this, not out of laziness, but just out of,
no.
I haven't gotten a shot up in 8 weeks. You know, there's got to be someone whose name rank and file NBA fans would know and be like, wait, that guy hasn't played in 8 weeks?
Right.
I also am fascinated to know there's got to be pickup games going on that we don't know about, that these guys are breaking laws, breaking points.
You think you're saying with NBA guys?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Or am I just a conspiracy?
Well, what's hard, what I would say is hard is if it gets out, you don't want to deal with the headache.
Yeah.
Everyone has a phone. So all it takes is like 3 guys walking out of one gym and someone's like, what were you doing? That just becomes like, who wants to deal with that?
So the gym I have access to, I go in a side door. I don't see anybody. Okay. And like the 3rd or 4th day that I was in the gym, this random kid and his mom walked through the gym to grab something on the other side of the gym. So I'm kind of like, what's going on? So I finished my workout and I go to leave and he's out in the hallway and he's like, yo man, can I get a picture? And I'm like, under any other circumstance, yeah, you could get a picture. But no, like, first of all, I'm not even really supposed to be here. And also, like, I can't be like next to you for a picture, man. Like, what the fuck?
It's like, listen, kid,
I'll
just give you some money. Just go away.
I did tell him, I was like, look, when things go back to normal, like, we'll work out together. I'll do a shooting session with you. Just not right now, you know. So, all right, let's get back to the. But by the way, hold on. Hasn't Giannis come out and said he doesn't have a hoop? I think he has.
I don't know.
That would, because that, like, the MVP of the NBA.
I'm serious, like, is this going to affect the playoff race? By the way, I need to ask a degenerate gambler among us. I'm not saying any of us are, or maybe I am, but I had you guys, by the way, in the over/under this year. I had your over, and I think I just saved like $300 because there's not going to be 82 games played, right? By the way, I made that.
What was the number?
39.5, and I made that bet. The day before Zion got hurt, I made that bet. I thought it was a lock. And then Zion got hurt the day after. So I've been counting.
We still could have got there. You think so? You
would have had to go. I did the math. You would have had to go like 16-4 or something like that.
Yeah, we did the math too.
How is Vegas dealing with that?
Well, to offset that, these are the only bet that I've gotten to make in the last whatever is I made it like 2 months ago. Early on, you could bet when the NBA was going to come back over under May 5th. And I hammered over May 5th because I was like, there's no way. This was the end of March. I was like, they're not getting this. I didn't have any insider information, but I was like, we're not getting back to this at all. And it went from like April 22nd to April 29th to May 5th. And then it was off the board. So I got I got $150 from that. That was the one profit that I've made in this pandemic.
I like it.
Tommy,
all right, I got two.
Go give me two here.
I've been watching a lot of YouTube concerts. Glastonbury, Coachella, mostly festivals, not like one-off shows. Just to see what it's like to be in that setting again. Because I know we're not going to actually get to experience it for a long, long time. I would recommend if anyone's on a YouTube deep dive and they want some good stuff. Glastonbury in particular is a festival. It's about an hour outside of London, and they have all it's like Coachella on steroids. They have all the biggest acts and probably about 90 to 100,000 people. JJ Win Butler's actually his Arcade Fire doing Glastonbury, them doing Wake Up. I think it was from like 2007, 2008 it's just amazing you'd be like, it sounds weird that you'd enjoy watching a video performance of this that you weren't even at. But the combination of like the quality of the performance and also just the quality of the footage is so good because the festival partners with the BBC, and so it just looks amazing.
I think it was I think that was the same Glastonbury, or maybe it was a year before or after that Jay-Z came out and did Oasis. Remember?
Yeah, it was the year after. That's another good one. Yeah, because they were making they were saying that he shouldn't have been headlining it.
He came out. He started his set by singing Wonderwall.
Yep. There are a lot of gems like that on YouTube. So that's one. The other thing I've been doing a lot of, which JJ knows, is well, sort of baked goods with marijuana in them, which I would strongly recommend in any state where this is legal for people to do. It just is there's two benefits. A, it's calming. It makes you feel better after you eat them. But B, you also get to learn how to cook a little bit. Like, it's not like you're just going and having somebody drop it off for you and then you just go and eat it or smoke it. Like, it takes a long time to make. And so I would strongly recommend anyone listening at home who has not tried this to get into it, but be safe.
You and I are having very different quarantine experiences. You have no kids. You're watching rom-coms, doing deep dive on YouTube concerts.
Who's the one making pop brownies and
making weed brownies? This is unbelievable.
JJ is just housing wine and watching movies about the end of the world.
I'm just trying to get through the fucking day, man. All right.
All right, Jason, you're up.
I'm going to suck at this, man, because I just finished episode 10 yesterday. So I have been doing very little but working on this thing. And my girlfriend didn't see Breaking Bad, so we're binging that every night. And when that gets too dark, the antidote is Big Mouth on Netflix, which I highly recommend. But
where are you with Breaking Bad right now?
I've seen it already, but we're on the rewatch for just about at the end of season 3. So it's right before half measures and full measures. I don't want to give anything away. Hank's in the hospital. He just got shot.
It gets way better.
Oh, it was. Yeah, I know. And it's right after the Fly episode when they were stuck in the basement with the Fly.
I think it's a pantheon show. It's a top 3 show ever.
That's why I've been begging her to watch. She hasn't seen The Godfather, which I'm begging her to watch with me.
That's a good one.
She hasn't seen Sopranos. She hasn't seen Mad Men. There's like basics that
we were gonna watch Sopranos. JJ, and Sean Feeney. Mm-hmm. And we watched a couple episodes, and then JJ went back to watching disaster movies.
You know what? It's
not enough time in the day. There's not enough time in the day for me.
That's the thing, is that it's daunting sometimes to be like, yeah, it's almost like homework. And
it's hard. It's hard.
Like I don't want to. I made a to-do list. I have a to-do list on my phone. And like 2 days after we decided to watch Sopranos, I realized that I had put watch Sopranos on my to-do list. And if something is on my fucking to-do list, it's something I don't want to do.
Negative. Yeah.
Yeah. It's also when you have one of these things, like the episodes are legit an hour. Yeah. And you got to run through 6 seasons, 12 episodes a pop at a minimum or whatever it is. Like it just is. I don't care how long we're going to be locked up like this. Like you're not finishing it with everything going on. So there is a reason to probably not start doing it.
Yeah.
Breaking Bad though is a good one if you're going to watch anything.
You can knock out 2 or 3 of those a night. It's super dark for these times, especially given that from a guilty pleasure standpoint, the Golden Girls, they do like 4 straight Golden Girls episodes every night at 11 or so on Hallmark and one of those things.
Oh, interesting.
It reminds me, when I hear the theme music, I'm back in my grandmother's house when I was like 8 or 9 years old. And I used to, like, my parents would go away and I had to stay overnight with her. It's just this like serotonin flood in my brain. Like everything's going to be okay. If I hear that music and I hear like the rejoin music with the strings and Blanche is making dumb jokes about sex and Dorothy is, busted on people. It's just a soothing, I can fall asleep to that. Or Cheers is another one that like just takes me back to my childhood. So old sitcoms, that's where I go for. Seinfeld, I could probably like lip sync all those episodes at this point, but that just takes me back to a comfortable place. To take it full circle to The Last Dance, I think that's one of the reasons it's resonating the way that it is that it's nostalgia and it's safe and fun and warm. And it reminds you of either watching those games or now you get to share those games with your kids or you call your boys who you watch those games with. The best messages I get is like my dad and I call each other every night after we watch these things. And thanks for, I think it's just, I think OJ is the most brilliant doc, sports or non, that I've ever seen. I don't know I think that the issues being tackled in OJ probably wouldn't resonate as much right now as a doc like The Last Dance would, because it's Last Dance is much lighter. And I'm not saying like that we just did a puff piece and it's nothing, but I think it's something that's like fun for people to watch. And if it was a different subject matter, then I don't know if people would flock or would gravitate to it the way that they are. So Golden Girls. Yeah.
All right. You're up to 4 now, guy. You're up to 4.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did I say?
Cocktails to Go, Breaking Bad, Big Mouth, and Golden Girls.
I only came in with Cocktails and Golden Girls.
Close it out, JJ.
I'm going to give you my last 2. So about a year ago, every Sunday, I started taking my 2. I love donuts. They're like my one sort of guilty pleasure when it comes to sweets. And so every Sunday, I take my boys, my two sons, to get donuts. And the local donut shop is open. And so I go in my mask, they stay in the car. I grab us donuts and we go back to the house and eat our donuts. And that's given me, and I think them too, some sense of normalcy. Like it's our sort of way of keeping track of what day it is. Is like, when is Sunday? Because some days, you get and you're like, wait, what is today? And then the last thing, and this is a shout out to Brian Koppelman, the showrunner from Billions, but the first cup of coffee in the morning, I keep having this conversation with people, but if you drink coffee, there's something that is so special about that first cup. Brian Koppelman calls it the Royale, and he's got a whole line of merch and mugs and t-shirts, raising money for charity. But there's something really special about that first cup of coffee, and it's about the brightest way to start your day, I think, right now. It gives you a little hope.
Every kind of coffee? Do you always make the same kind?
Well, I've been the donut shop has a Stumptown coffee, so I've been using Stumptown. Grind the beans myself and then kill it.
I'm going to Sidecar tomorrow.
Good for you.
I'm going to make sure to take a picture and send it to you.
If you can overnight me 6
have you ever heard of Sidecar
donuts, that'd be
coffee
amazing.
Place in LA?
It's a donut shop in Santa Monica. That's it's by far the best donuts in the world.
That's
by a long shot.
You,
like, huh?
That's a trek for you, right? From where you
but I'm driving. Here's the other thing. I guess this is one of my guilty pleasures. Is usually driving in LA sucks because there's no traffic and there's no one on the road. Like, I got takeout last night from a place in downtown Bavel, which is a super good restaurant. That normally would probably take 40 minutes to get there from my house, and it took 14 yesterday. So just getting in the car and drive. If you're in a place where you're able to do that, and obviously New York is the worst place for that. But most of our listeners, I feel like, are in a place where they can get in a car and drive around. Just getting and driving and going to do an errand that normally would feel annoying is actually really nice right now.
We may go up to Midtown today, just because I want to see it. Like, there was a picture I saw yesterday somewhere of like 50th and 5th, at 3:15 on a Thursday. Like, it's like a ghost town. I just want to kind of witness some of these things for myself. And you can't do it with like Central Park and there's the park outside of my place. So when it gets nice out, people are like borderline irresponsibly crowding parks. Yeah. But on a rainy day like this, I feel like it would be just kind of you want to check off the box and say that, like, I saw something that no one else has ever seen before. I do the same thing, JJ, too, for normalcy's sake. And it's kind of a Royale twist because I get the same iced coffee from the same really good bagel place in Tribeca, but I seamless pick up an egg sandwich from this place every morning. And that's my routine. Is I'll take my dog out, or my girlfriend will take him out. And then I need to go on a walk just myself, listen to a podcast, listen to some music.
JJ, what's your iced coffee feeling? I don't think we've had this conversation.
Hard pass.
Yeah, me too.
Even in the summer, if I need that third cup at 2:30 in the afternoon and it's 90 degrees out, I just want a black coffee.
I'm the opposite.
I don't think I've ever finished a cup of black coffee.
Always iced coffee.
Cup of iced coffee.
Even if it's cold?
I don't like the taste. It's a drug for me. That's it. I'm only doing it for the buzz and the rush and the smell. So I don't really enjoy the taste enough to like savor it. I've probably had less than 10 cups of hot coffee in my life, but
wow. And
so when it's -6 and I walk into my coffee shop here, they're like shaking their head at me like, "What's your problem?" But I'm just trying to get through it. It's let's be honest. I'm there for the egg and cheese. It's not the coffee.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Does anybody have anything else to add? Tom, do you have another one? Do you have anything else to add to your list?
No. Everything else sucks besides the 4 things that I mentioned.
Okay.
I need to check my email.
And we should say that, The Last Dance obviously has been a huge source of comfort for me, and I know for Tommy too, and for a lot of people. So
I will say this to your point, Jason, about people like calling their dads and everything like that. It's certainly and it probably would have been this way regardless, but it's certainly a moment that almost everybody in my life actively plans their schedule around in a way that nothing else exists right now that is like this in any capacity. So it's like Sunday night, wherever you are, okay, block out Sunday night, because not only to watch it, but for the commentary around it. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's partially a tribute to the circumstances, but also to the quality. If it wasn't good, people would have given up after 2 episodes.
Sure. The circumstances are so outlandish though, that it's like, there's nothing else to watch. What's surreal to me is that when I hang up on this, there's going to be an email that comes through to me within an hour. There's one final fix that we had to make to 9. There was like a technical glitch, and then that's it. It's done.
Wow.
we had always pictured this thing as like, we would all get together. We're going to go to this bar, overlooking the water, this outdoor bar near the edit room. And like all 12 of us were going to like celebrate. And now it's just like, I'm sitting in my apartment, like maybe pop open some champagne or crack a beer or something. I don't know what to do, but it's surreal that it's almost.
So it's 3.5 years. What's the
2.5 actual work. Research was 4 years, but 2.5 of actual work on it.
Well, congratulations. Seriously, on finishing. Yep. That's amazing. And congrats on a great product. All right, Jason, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate the time. And congrats again on the doc, and looking forward to watching episodes 9 and 10. We appreciate it, man.
And we'll see you in New York.
All right, man. Thanks for having me.